The Youth Employment Crisis, Time for Action.
In 2012, the global youth employment crisis is unprecedented. Of the world's estimated 200 million unemployed people, about 75 million are young people. Globally, young people are 3 times more likely than adults to be out of a job, and 4 out of 10 people unemployed worldwide are young people. The ongoing youth employment crisis, aggravated by the global financial crisis, had created a renewed sense of urgency for action. Across the world, young women and men face real and increasing difficulty in finding decent work. Youth aspirations for jobs, freedom, and social justice, their deep alienation from the system that led to the economic and social exclusion of a whole generation of young people, generating extreme inequalities of wealth and income, have triggered a surge in youth-led protests against economic injustice across the world. An intensification of the youth employment crisis poses problems from an intergenerational perspective. The current crisis constitutes a serious breach of the norm of improving employment and economic prospects for each successive generation, as well as it threatens to cause a sharp widening in inequality within the current youth cohort. There is thus a clear risk of ever more unequal societies if the youth employment crisis is allowed to persist.
Youth unemployment is only the tip of the iceberg. There is evidence of rising inequalities, insecurity, and vulnerability, as well as declining quality of jobs available for youth. In developing countries, young workers are especially vulnerable to underemployment and poverty. Globally, there are about 152 million youth living in extreme poverty on less than $125 a day. In 2011, young people made up almost a quarter of the total working poor, but less than a fifth of non-poor workers. Young workers are also disproportionately represented in low-paid work. Data confirm the higher incidence of informality among young workers compared to their adult counterparts. The deterioration in the quality of jobs available to young workers is also visible in the progressive expansion of temporary employment, as well as the shorter duration of the fixed-term contracts in recent years. The proportion of young temporary workers who could not find permanent employment is increasing in many countries. The transition from school to work has also become more insecure and slower. All of these factors contribute to the discouragement and detachment of young people from the labor market. In 2012, an increasing percentage of young people were neither in education nor in employment and had withdrawn from the labor market given the difficulties for finding a job.
Young people are not equally affected, as some are more disadvantaged in the labor market. This depends on
age.
The younger, the more vulnerable.
Gender.
The gap has been closing, but young women are still at a disadvantage.
National and ethnic origin.
Often a cause of poor labor market outcomes and decent work deficits.
Socioeconomic background.
Young people from poor households tend to become young working poor.
Literacy, education, and skills.
Unemployment, underemployment, and informality higher among less educated and school dropouts.
Migration.
Subject to dismissal, discrimination, and sometimes xenophobia, exasperated by tight labor markets.
HIV/AIDS.
Particularly vulnerable to unemployment and underemployment and poverty.
Disabilities.
Less likely to attend school and face more disadvantages, as well as other individual characteristics.
The youth employment crisis has been a structural feature of the global jobs deficit, which worsened significantly as a result of the global financial crisis. The gap between the aspirations of youth and their potential and the opportunities offered to them in the labor market and in society are widening. Youth unemployment has in fact reached unprecedented proportions in many countries. Youth unemployment is not a new phenomenon. What is new is the staggering proportion it has reached. Between 2007 and 2010, youth unemployment increased by 5.1 million, and in 2011, 4 out of 10 unemployed was a young woman or man.
Youth were hardest hit by the global crisis in industrialized countries. Youth unemployment rates increased by 4.1 percentage points in the developed economies in European Union between 2008 and 2009, and by 3.4 percentage points in Central and Southeastern Europe, non-EU, and the CIS. These are the largest annual increases in youth unemployment rates ever recorded in any region. Youth unemployment has been and remains highest in Middle East and North Africa, followed by the CIS. The youth-to-adult unemployment rate was highest as much as 5 times in South Asia and Southeast Asia.
600 million jobs challenge. We have 200 million unemployed, which are going to increase with the latest IMF calculations, and you have 400 million young people coming into the labor market.
Aspirations for jobs, freedom, and social justice are triggering youth-led protests across the world. The current situation is undermining young women and men's own faith in the current policy paradigm and the possibility of a better future. In 2011, there was a surge of significant youth-led political and social protest movements across the world, carrying with them youth aspirations for jobs, freedom, and social justice. The youth-led protests from Indignados to Occupy Wall Street to Occupy All Streets or Occupy Together took place in more than 1,000 cities and 82 countries.
I haven't got high hopes, so I'm probably going to leave and get a job somewhere else in another country.
Estoy como un poco perdido en general así y por eso el futuro está todavía como muy incierto para mí.
الظروف الاقتصادية في البلد دي ما تسمحش لأي حد أو أي شاب متخرج اللي هو يشتغل دلوقتي في أي حاجة. مفيش شغل في أي وأرضى بأي حاجة تجيلي أشتغل بيها.
It is the realization of an ongoing youth employment crisis of unprecedented proportions that prompted the governing body of the ILO to put this topic on the agenda of the 2012 International Labour Conference for a new general discussion.
Already in 2005, the ILC resolution concerning youth employment called for a strategy that combines macroeconomic and microeconomic interventions, addresses both labor demand and supply, both the quantity and the quality of employment. The upcoming 2012 conference discussion on youth employment is an opportunity to review action taken by governments, social partners, and the ILO since 2005.
Next are some of the key findings and lessons learned since 2005, as analyzed by the ILO in the background report prepared for the 2012 ILC discussion on youth employment.
Youth employment is a rising priority in national policy agendas, but it is not sufficiently translated into action. Since the 2005 ILC resolution, there has been increasing commitment by member states to place youth employment in national policy agendas. However, it is seldom translated into a comprehensive policy framework, establishing a clear set of policy priorities that would bring coherence and therefore enhance the impact of the youth interventions. Funding allocated for policy implementation is limited, and resources earmarked are mostly underestimated. Making youth employment a priority objective of national policy agendas entails adequate and predictable funding to support sustainable policy interventions. In that regard, assembling regular and rigorous knowledge of the long-run fiscal requirements of youth employment policies should become a key focus of policymakers. Most interventions for promoting youth employment focus on supply-side measures, while a major constraint in most labor markets is demand and the volume of new jobs created.
A favorable environment for youth employment by sustaining long-run inclusive, job-rich growth. High growth alone is not sufficient to solve the youth employment problem. Its employment content matters. Promoting economic diversification and productive transformation through an industrial policy and sectoral strategies that stimulate investment can fuel the engine of job creation, both for adults and young workers. Alleviating the constraints on private sector growth with particular emphasis on access to finance for SMEs can also boost job creation. Reducing negative impact of volatility by engaging in timely and targeted counter-cyclical policies can also be effective.
Government expenditures on employment policies targeting youth need to be maintained even in countries embarking on fiscal consolidation and austerity measures. In the first 2 years after the onset of the global crisis in 2008, a number of policy interventions were targeting youth employment. There has since been a dramatic change of the policy stance in many industrialized countries, where fiscal consolidation currently dominates the policy agenda. From the standpoint of the youth employment crisis, a sharp and immediate reduction in government expenditures is likely to aggravate the problem.
Considerable progress has been made in education. However, 130 million young people still lack basic reading, writing, and numeracy skills. Ensuring universal access to basic education and improving the quality of training and education at all levels remain primary objectives for enhancing the employability of young people. As for the numerous young people emerging from education, without basic skills, it is very difficult to compete in the labor market. Second chance initiatives have been effective in targeting the youth left behind. Programs that engage youth throughout adolescence appear to be the most effective. Practical curricula, flexible schedules, and less formal instruction methods are likely to attract and retain young people. To increase the cost-effectiveness of second chance initiatives, programs need to target the poor, particularly girls.
Better links between education, training, and the world of work is an important policy area. Education, training, lifelong learning foster a virtuous cycle of improved employability, higher productivity, income growth, and development. With accelerating technical progress and globalization, finding a niche in global markets increasingly requires countries to continuously upgrade the education and skill levels of their labor force. Experience also shows that technical and vocational education and training needs to be coordinated, regulated, and with high-quality delivery systems that address geographical, gender, and economic diversity and meet the needs of industry. The possibilities for efficient deployment of ICT to modernize TVET curricula, increase relevance of skills provision, and expand enrollment capacity should be harnessed. Strengthening the link between education and training systems and the world of work is at the heart of TVET reforms. The need for an increase in quality, financing, and management has also been recognized, and steps are being taken. Another important factor is proper coordination across various institutions and actors, as well as improved monitoring and evaluation.
Apprenticeship is considered an effective way to prepare young people for the labor market. In several developed countries, formal apprenticeship and on-the-job training schemes have been strengthened during the global financial crisis. The interaction of in-classroom and workplace training increases the likelihood of positive labor market outcomes by 30%. Questions have been raised about how replicable these successes can be in developing countries, where the formal wage sector is small and institutions are weak. In many developing countries, informal apprenticeship continues to be the largest provider of skills for young people. While the drawbacks of informal apprenticeship are widely recognized, yet for many informal economy workers, this may prove to be the first and often only available option. Efforts are thus needed to improve the system, and innovative experiences linking informal apprenticeship to formal certification systems are promising.
Active labor market policies are of strategic importance for promoting youth. A package of services integrating and sequencing various components on both the demand, such as tax incentives, self-employment, wage subsidies, reduction in social security contributions, and the supply side, which means, for instance, training, career guidance, and other job search assistance, is the most efficient model. Well-targeted active labor market policies that are tailored to individual needs are more successful than generic targeting of youth as a group. Well-designed wage subsidies or government contribution to social security can help if targeted at disadvantaged youth. Employment services can also play a key role in easing the school-to-work transition, but may lack technical capacity and financial resources.
Youth entrepreneurship can be promoted as a career option. In 2011, the total number of youth entrepreneurship promotion initiatives constituted 20% of all youth programs, making it the second most important after skills training. However, youth entrepreneurship programs are most effective when they are delivered in an enabling environment, including for SMEs and encouraging transition to formality. Such programs try to overcome barriers that youth encounter in starting and developing a business and are supported by a broad range of services. The implementation of these programs in partnership with the private sector can also help ensure success.
Cooperatives and the social economy provide opportunities for youth. Cooperatives and other types of social economy enterprises provide young people the opportunity to create their own enterprises and gain self-employment. Cooperatives are more resilient and sustainable than other startups, and thus provide young people a solid opportunity to create and maintain their own enterprises. It is estimated that cooperatives provide 100 million jobs worldwide. The advantages of the cooperatives include low capital requirements, limited liability, and the fact that they bring together both economic and social aims. Cooperatives are relevant to rural and urban areas and for all skill levels, and they allow for the pooling of experience, skills, and resources of young people.
Public investment and employment programs can efficiently generate jobs for youth, improve their skills, and provide a stepping stone into the labor market. Young people figure prominently in these programs. Specific targets of 50 to 60% are common across the world. Public investment and employment programs have proven their anti-crisis impact and counter-cyclical role in the countries that have resorted to them, including during the global financial crisis. Limited administrative, managerial, and financial capacities in developing countries for deploying other types of targeted active labor market policies also show the relevance of public investment and employment programs for disadvantaged youth.
Policies to facilitate access to jobs, including first jobs and experience, should not be to the detriment of young workers' rights at work. Incentivizing the hiring of young workers at the expense of their rights and social benefits results in increased vulnerability and insecurity on a long-term basis. Low levels of protection and assistance may impact on the future development of young workers as documented by the ILO. International labor standards provide the normative framework for addressing the youth employment crisis and are a means to protect young people's rights.
Young people face special challenges in accessing social protection. First-time job seekers are usually not covered by unemployment benefits. Young unemployment women and men who have some work experience are less likely to be eligible for statutory unemployment benefits as compared to older workers. Young women are less likely to access unemployment benefits than young men because of the gendered employment patterns of young people. An important lesson drawn from recent experience is that activation policies work best when the receipt of social assistance is conditional upon active job search or participation in active labor market programs.
Much more can be done on social dialogue with respect to youth employment policies. The social partners have a key role in the formulation and implementation of policies for decent work for youth, and in ensuring effective youth participation and representation in the policy decisions. There is also a need for more initiatives of collective bargaining on youth employment issues. When ILO support has been sought for developing integrated youth action plans, the participation of social partners and consultations with a wide range of youth organizations and networks were promoted and facilitated.
A high level of policy coherence and coordination is required in dealing with the youth employment crisis. There isn't a good practice institutional model. What matters is that responsibilities lie with the government agency, which has the appropriate technical capacity and can also muster political support to ensure policy coherence and coordination among government institutions and engage social partners. Monitoring and evaluation systems are an effective way of allocating resources to what works. Employers and workers' organizations should also be involved in the policy design and implementation.
This has been a snapshot of the wide range of policy areas that have an impact on decent work for youth, for the creation of employment opportunities, as well as for upholding their rights, protection, and quality of work and life. The effectiveness of these measures depends not only on the good diagnosis of the constraints in any given context and for specific groups of youth, the resources allocated, and the implementation, but on the coherence and interaction across these policy areas.
The ILO supports youth employment through its normative action and through the implementation of the 2005 ILC resolution concerning youth employment. The strategy is based on 3 pillars.
1. Knowledge building.
2. Advocacy and promotion of decent work for youth.
And 3. Technical assistance to support ILO constituents.
Since 2005, some 60 countries have received ILO support for developing and implementing strategies for youth. As a result of the global financial crisis, the demand for ILO assistance significantly increased in the 2010-11 biennium, with 47 member states having requested support from the ILO.
The youth employment crisis can only be tackled with a great deal of mobilization, coordination, and partnerships at the global level. ILO's key role in international networks has provided new opportunities to build international consensus and influence the international agenda for decent work for youth. These networks and partnerships include the Millennium Declaration and the Millennium Development Goals and the UN system, the G20, international and regional financial institutions, as well as other multilateral and regional organizations.
The upcoming 2012 ILC discussion on youth employment is a new opportunity at the global level for governments, workers, and employers' organizations to rise to the challenge and expand efforts in addressing the youth employment crisis.
During the month of March, having been designated the month of youth employment, a series of events, such as this one, will be organized to host discussions on the decent work agenda for youth in the country and to share good practices.
More specifically, the national events aim to establish a platform for interaction among young people, policymakers, and the social partners on the youth employment challenge in the country, identify and share good practice on youth employment policies and programs implemented at the country level, strengthen youth employment action and partnerships at the country level.
Now, today, at this event, it's your turn to tell us your own story.